Welcome back. If you're joining us for the first time, this is part 2 of our exploration of 10 medicinal herbs that may already be part of your daily life, without you fully realizing what they're doing inside the body. In part 1, we covered 5 plants: lavender, rosemary, chamomile, peppermint, and elderberry, each one more nuanced than it first appeared, each one carrying a long history of traditional use and a growing body of modern research that suggests the familiarity we feel toward them may be more justified than we ever knew. But if you haven't seen part 1, don't worry. Each herb stands on its own. You'll find everything you need right here. Today we're looking at the final 5, and this half of the list takes a different direction. We begin with something almost everyone has encountered, a plant so widely used for skincare that it appears in products from pharmacies to kitchen shelves. Then we move to one of the most heavily researched spices in the context of chronic inflammation, and discover that how you use it may matter more than whether you use it at all. Then comes a herb with more clinical trial data behind it than almost any other immune-related plant. One where the evidence is real, but the variability is just as real. We'll look at a root used for thousands of years for digestion and nausea, and understand the specific biological mechanisms that may explain why it works. And we'll finish with number 1, an ingredient so common, so ordinary, that most people cook with it several times a week, without ever asking what it might quietly be doing across multiple systems in the body. 5 more plants, 5 more layers of understanding. Let's begin with number 6 is one you've almost certainly encountered before: aloe vera. Maybe you keep a plant on your windowsill. Maybe you've reached for an aloe-based gel after a day in the sun. Or perhaps you remember someone in your family cutting open a leaf and applying it directly to the skin. It's one of those remedies that feels completely natural to trust. And that trust has been built over a very long time. Aloe vera has been used for skin healing for thousands of years in ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, and across many cultures around the world. But what does modern research actually say about it? Because aloe vera is one of those plants where the reputation is strong and the science is genuinely promising, but also more nuanced than most people realize. Let's look at what's inside. Aloe vera gel contains polysaccharides, enzymes, and several compounds associated with anti-inflammatory activity. Together, these may help reduce inflammation at the skin's surface, support collagen production, and assist in tissue repair. The gel itself is made up of roughly 99% water, which partly explains why it feels so immediately cooling and hydrating when applied to irritated or dry skin. There's also evidence suggesting it may help reduce histamine response, which is part of why skin feels less itchy or reactive after application. In terms of wound healing, some studies suggest aloe vera may help shorten recovery time, particularly with minor burns and surface-level skin irritation. Imagine applying it to a mild sunburn, the redness, the heat, the tightness of the skin, and within a short time, feeling that sensation begin to ease. That's the kind of experience many people associate with aloe vera. And yet here's something worth understanding. Results across studies aren't always consistent. Aloe vera appears to work well for certain types of skin conditions, but not equally well for all wounds or all skin types. The anti-inflammatory effects are real and documented, involving pathways related to cytokines and specific enzymes that help regulate the body's response to damage. But the degree of benefit can vary, depending on the situation, the formulation, and the individual. Because aloe vera is so familiar and so widely available, it's easy to assume it works for everything skin-related. But that assumption may lead people to rely on it in situations where proper medical care is actually what's needed. So the most accurate way to think about it is this: aloe vera may help soothe the skin and support the healing process, but it works best as a complementary option, something that sits alongside good skincare and proper care, not as a replacement for it. Aloe vera may help calm irritated skin and support recovery, but it's best used as a gentle support, not a complete solution. Now, we've been moving through herbs that work on the surface, on the gut, on the immune system. But the next one is different because it works deeper. Number 7 has been called one of the most studied spices in modern research. And the reason comes down to a single compound inside it, one that scientists have been examining for its relationship with one of the most common underlying issues in the aging body: chronic inflammation. Let's talk about turmeric. Number 7 is one you almost certainly have in your kitchen right now. Turmeric, that deep, golden spice found in curries, soups, and warm drinks. It's been part of traditional cooking and medicine for thousands of years, used across South Asia, the Middle East, and beyond. And in recent decades, it's become one of the most widely studied natural compounds in the context of something that affects nearly everyone as they age: chronic inflammation. But here's where it gets more interesting and more nuanced than most people expect. The reason turmeric receives so much scientific attention isn't really about the spice itself. It's about one specific compound found inside it: curcumin. Curcumin has been studied for its potential to interact with certain pathways in the body that regulate inflammation. Specifically, it may influence signaling molecules called cytokines and a key molecular switch known as NF-kappa B, which plays a central role in how the body initiates and sustains inflammatory responses. In simple terms, curcumin may help dial down some of the biological signals that contribute to ongoing, low-grade inflammation. It also shows antioxidant properties, meaning it may help the body manage oxidative stress, which is the kind of internal wear that accumulates quietly over time. For many people, this translates into a simple hope that adding turmeric to their diet might ease joint discomfort, support heart health, or just help the body handle the slow burden of aging a little better. And that hope isn't unreasonable. Some studies do suggest curcumin may help reduce certain inflammation markers and may offer modest support for mild joint discomfort. But here's something that most people who use turmeric don't realize. Curcumin is very poorly absorbed by the body on its own. When you consume it, the body metabolizes it quickly and eliminates it before it can have much effect. This is a genuine challenge, and it's one reason why many people may use turmeric regularly without experiencing the benefits they expected. So what makes a difference? Research suggests that combining curcumin with piperine, the active compound in black pepper, can significantly increase how much the body actually absorbs and retains. Some studies indicate absorption may improve substantially with this combination. It's a small detail, but it illustrates something worth understanding: that how you consume something can matter just as much as whether you consume it at all. There are also practical considerations. Turmeric, used in cooking, is generally considered safe, but at higher doses, particularly in supplement form, some people may experience digestive discomfort, including nausea or loose stools, and not everyone who uses turmeric notices a clear difference. Many of the studies on curcumin are relatively small, conducted over short time periods, and results vary depending on the individual, the formulation, and the dose. So the most grounded way to think about turmeric is this: it's a genuinely interesting compound with real biological potential. But its effectiveness in practice depends heavily on absorption, on how it's combined with other foods or supplements, and on the individual's own health context. Turmeric, through curcumin, may support the body's response to inflammation and oxidative stress, but how much it actually helps depends largely on how well the body can absorb and use it. Now, turmeric works quietly, influencing processes deep within the body's chemistry. But the next herb takes a more direct approach because number 8 has been the subject of more clinical research than almost any other herb associated with immune support. It's been studied specifically in the context of respiratory infections, the kind that become more disruptive as we get older. And the question researchers keep asking is, does it actually change how the immune system responds? Let's look at Echinacea. Number 8, Echinacea. You've probably seen it on a pharmacy shelf. Or maybe you've reached for it yourself at the first sign of a scratchy throat or a runny nose. It's become almost instinctive for many people. The moment flu season arrives or the moment someone nearby starts coughing, Echinacea is one of the first things that comes to mind. And sometimes it seems to help. Other times, not as much. And most people aren't entirely sure why. That inconsistency is actually one of the most important things to understand about Echinacea. But first, let's look at what may be happening inside the body. When a respiratory virus enters the system, the immune system begins to respond. It activates, it identifies the threat, it starts producing the signals and cells needed to contain and reduce the infection. What Echinacea may do is interact with parts of that response. Research suggests it may help modulate immune activity, not simply stimulate it, but help regulate it. It may influence certain cytokines, the chemical messengers involved in inflammation and immune signaling. And in laboratory studies, Echinacea extracts have shown antiviral activity against several respiratory viruses, including some evidence suggesting it may interfere with how viruses enter cells. So the biological potential is real. But here's where the picture becomes more nuanced. One of the most comprehensive reviews of Echinacea research, a Cochrane review analyzing 24 randomized controlled trials involving more than 4,600 participants, found that some studies showed a reduction in the likelihood of getting a cold, and some showed shorter duration of symptoms, but the results were not consistent across all studies. Some trials showed meaningful benefit, others showed limited or minimal effect. And that variability points to something many people don't realize about Echinacea. Not all products are the same. Echinacea comes in many forms, different species of the plant, different parts used, different extraction methods, different concentrations. One specific extract, sometimes referred to in research as Echinacea, has been studied more extensively, with some findings suggesting it may reduce the number of times people fall ill and the number of days they spend unwell. But a generic product, labeled Echinacea, may behave very differently than what was tested in those studies. This is something the supplement world often glosses over, the assumption that all versions of an herb work the same way. They don't. So what's the honest takeaway? Echinacea is not a cold cure. It doesn't reliably prevent illness, and its effects, when present, tend to be supportive and subtle, rather than dramatic. For some people, used consistently with a quality product, it may help the body respond a little better during vulnerable seasons. For others, the effect may be minimal. Overall, Echinacea is generally well tolerated, with few reported side effects at standard doses. But like any supplement, it's worth understanding what you're actually taking, and not assuming that familiarity equals guaranteed effectiveness. Echinacea may help support the immune system and your body's response to respiratory infections, but results can vary significantly depending on the product, the extract, and the individual. And Echinacea works by potentially helping the immune system respond, which is a fairly specific kind of support. But the next herb is different, because number 9 has been used for thousands of years, not for immunity, but for something far more immediate, the kind of discomfort that strikes the stomach, nausea, bloating, the feeling that digestion just isn't cooperating. It's one of the oldest and most consistently used digestive remedies in human history. And modern research has been taking a closer look at whether that long tradition of use has a measurable biological basis. Let's talk about ginger. Number 9. Ginger. Few herbs feel as universally trusted as ginger. It's been used for thousands of years across Asia, the Middle East, and beyond, specifically for digestion and nausea. And that trust feels completely reasonable. It's backed by tradition, by cultural familiarity, and increasingly by modern research. But this is where it becomes more interesting, because most people who reach for ginger tea or add fresh ginger to a meal think of it simply as something that settles the stomach. What they may not realize is that ginger may be interacting with some very specific biological processes underneath that familiar feeling of relief. Here's what may actually be happening. When food enters the digestive system, the stomach needs to move efficiently, contracting, processing, and emptying at the right pace. When that process slows or becomes irregular, discomfort follows, and nausea, in many cases, is connected to exactly this kind of disruption, often involving signals that travel between the gut and the brain. Ginger contains 2 key active compounds, gingerols and shogols. Research suggests these compounds may help increase gastric motility, supporting the stomach's natural movement and helping it empty more efficiently. They may also interact with serotonin receptors in the digestive tract, and serotonin plays a significant role in regulating nausea signals between the gut and the brain. So ginger isn't simply masking discomfort. It may be working with the underlying processes that cause nausea in the first place. The evidence for this is meaningful. Multiple studies suggest ginger may be effective at reducing nausea in specific situations, including pregnancy-related nausea, post-surgical nausea, and in some cases, nausea related to chemotherapy. It also shows potential for supporting digestion more broadly, reducing feelings of bloating and discomfort after meals. But here's something worth understanding. The effectiveness of ginger is not identical across all situations. It tends to work best for mild to moderate nausea, and its effects are often subtle and gradual, rather than immediate or dramatic. The form also matters. Fresh ginger, dried ginger, standardized extracts, and teas may behave differently in the body, with different concentrations of active compounds and different rates of absorption. And not everyone responds the same way. Research findings, while generally promising, are not entirely consistent across all studies and all populations. Yet most people use ginger almost automatically, the way you might reach for something familiar without thinking about the mechanism behind it. They know it helps, or seems to, but they rarely stop to consider what it's actually doing inside the digestive system, or why the context in which they use it might affect how well it works. As a natural option that is widely available, generally well tolerated, and supported by both tradition and modern research, ginger remains one of the more practical herbs in this list. Ginger may help ease nausea and support digestion by interacting with the gut's own motility and signaling systems, backed by both centuries of traditional use and modern clinical research. And ginger works quietly, supporting digestion from within, through compounds that interact with the gut's own natural processes. But the final herb on this list takes a broader approach entirely. Because number 10 isn't known for one specific benefit. It's been studied across multiple systems in the body simultaneously: immunity, cardiovascular health, antimicrobial activity. It's also one of the most commonly used ingredients in kitchens worldwide, something most people cook with several times a week without ever thinking of it as anything more than flavor. Let's talk about garlic. To number 10, garlic. If there's one ingredient that almost every culture on Earth has used for both cooking and health support, it's this one. From ancient Egypt to traditional Chinese medicine, from Mediterranean kitchens to modern clinical research, garlic has occupied a unique position as both an everyday food and a widely studied natural compound. And most people already trust it. They add it to meals without thinking twice. They associate it with warmth, flavor, and something vaguely good for you. But here's what most people don't fully understand. Garlic's effects on the body depend significantly on how it's prepared. And that single detail changes everything. When you crush or chop a clove of garlic, an enzyme reaction occurs, producing a compound called allicin. Allicin is not present in an intact clove. It's created the moment the cell walls are broken, and it's this compound that researchers believe is responsible for much of what makes garlic biologically interesting. Allicin has demonstrated antimicrobial properties in laboratory studies, showing activity against a range of bacteria, viruses, and fungi. This may partly explain why garlic has been used for centuries to support the body during illness. But the biological story doesn't stop there. Garlic has also been studied extensively for its potential effects on cardiovascular health. Some research suggests it may help support modest reductions in blood pressure, influence cholesterol levels, and improve circulation. These aren't dramatic transformations, but for something that most people consume regularly as food, the potential for quiet, consistent support across the cardiovascular system is worth understanding. Then, there's immunity. Garlic may help activate certain immune cells and may play a role in modulating inflammatory responses, helping the body maintain a more balanced defense or underactive one. So when you put it together, antimicrobial activity, cardiovascular support, immune modulation, garlic becomes something quite rare in the plant world. Most herbs on this list have been studied for their effects on one or two specific systems. Garlic has been examined across multiple systems simultaneously. And yet, most people who cook with it every day have no idea that the way they prepare it may affect how much biological activity actually reaches the body. Cooking garlic immediately after chopping it may reduce allicin content significantly. Letting it rest for several minutes after crushing before applying heat may help preserve more of its active compounds. A small detail, but one that matters. Of course, garlic is not a cure for anything. Its effects are supportive, gradual, and variable. Not everyone experiences noticeable benefits, and some of its more specific claims still require larger, longer-term studies to confirm. At high doses, it can cause digestive discomfort. And like any supplement, it may interact with certain medications. But as a naturally occurring, widely available ingredient that has been used across thousands of years of human history, and that continues to be studied across cardiovascular, immune, and antimicrobial research, garlic deserves to be seen as more than just a flavor. It's one of the most multifunctional plants that has ever been examined through a scientific lens. And the fact that most people already have it in their kitchen, already use it several times a week, without realizing what it may quietly be doing inside the body is perhaps the most fitting way to end this list. Because that's really what this has been about. Not 10 exotic remedies you've never heard of, not complicated protocols or expensive supplements, but 10 plants, many of them already in your kitchen, your garden, or your evening cup, that have been studied, examined, and found to have real biological interactions with the human body. Lavender and chamomile, working with the nervous system toward rest. Rosemary, with a history tied to memory that may not be coincidence. Peppermint, touching digestion, sensation, and breathing all at once. Elderberry and Echinacea, offering quiet support during vulnerable seasons. Aloe Vera, working at the surface, where the body meets the world. Turmeric, reaching into the chemistry of chronic inflammation. Ginger, supporting the gut's own signaling and movement. And garlic, touching more systems than almost any other plant we know. None of them are cures. None of them replace medical care. But all of them are worth understanding, because the more clearly you see what they do and how they do it, the more thoughtfully you can use them. That's the real value of knowledge like this. Not that it changes everything overnight, but that it quietly changes how you see the things you've always had around you. So we've reached the end of this list. 10 plants, 10 different stories, 10 different ways that something familiar may be doing more inside the body than most people ever stop to consider. But before we close, there's something worth reflecting on. Because if you've watched this far, there's a good chance you already have some interest in natural approaches to health. And that interest makes sense. Many people are drawn to herbs and plant-based remedies for very understandable reasons. A desire to support the body in ways that feel natural. A growing frustration with systems that feel complex, expensive, or difficult to navigate. The appeal of something that has been used for generations, something that doesn't feel clinical or intimidating. And sometimes, simply because it worked before, or seemed to. These are legitimate instincts. They're not wrong. But here's something worth holding on to as you move forward. Does not automatically mean safe for everyone. Familiar does not automatically mean fully understood. And traditional does not automatically mean proven. The herbs we explored today, lavender supporting rest, chamomile interacting with the brain's calming pathways, rosemary and its ancient connection to memory, peppermint touching digestion, sensation, and breathing, elderberry and echinacea offering support during vulnerable seasons, aloe vera working quietly at the surface of the skin, turmeric reaching into the chemistry of inflammation, ginger easing the gut's own signaling, and garlic touching more systems than almost any plant we know. None of them are miracle solutions. None of them replace medical care. None of them work identically for every person. What they are is a starting point, a set of tools, some better studied than others, some more reliable in certain contexts than others, that may offer quiet, consistent support when used thoughtfully. And thoughtfully is the key word. Because the most useful question to ask about any herb or natural remedy isn't, does it work? It's a set of more specific questions. What does the research actually say? Not just tradition, not just marketing. Is this supporting my health as part of a broader approach? Or am I using it to avoid addressing something more serious? And is this realistic for my situation, my health history, my current medications, my actual needs? These questions don't require a medical degree to ask. They just require a willingness to look a little more carefully at things that feel familiar. Because one of the patterns that shows up consistently in how people use herbs and supplements is this: familiarity breeds assumption. We use something because it's always been there, because someone we trust recommended it, because it feels safe or natural or just obvious. And sometimes that instinct is right, but sometimes it leads people to overestimate an effect, or to miss an important limitation, or to use something in a way that doesn't actually allow it to work the way research suggests it might. The goal of everything we've explored today isn't to make you trust herbs more or trust them less. It's to help you see them more clearly as supportive tools with real biological potential, real limitations, and real variability, depending on how they're used. That kind of informed, balanced perspective is what separates someone who simply follows trends from someone who makes genuinely thoughtful decisions about their own health. And that's exactly who you're becoming by taking the time to understand this. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Which herb on this list surprised you most? Was there something you've been using for years that you now see differently? Or something you'd never considered before? Leave a comment below. We read them, and your perspective genuinely helps us understand what matters most to you. If you found this useful, sharing it with someone you care about is one of the simplest ways to pass on something that might actually be helpful to them. And if you'd like to keep exploring topics like this, evidence-based, balanced, and designed for real life, subscribing means you won't miss what's coming next. Everything in this video is intended for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice, and it is not a substitute for the guidance of a qualified healthcare professional. Always consult your doctor before making changes to your health routine, especially if you are managing an existing condition or taking medication. Take care of yourself, and thank you for watching.